Hello everybody, this is a technical video on how to moss up your wreath ring. Here I have a 12-inch copper wreath ring frame to work with. I've got some binding wire. Here's this one on a plastic reel or on a wooden spool. I also have a pair of snippers and I've got some moss, which is a bag of gorgeous moss that is from a licensed supplier in the UK. So firstly, with your moss, what you want to make sure is that it is moist, not soaking wet, because you don't want the wreaths to absolutely drain with water when they're hung on the door. So you just want it nice and moist, damp to touch. And then you want to make sure that you've pulled out anything like large twigs or bits of cones from out of your moss, and separate by pulling apart the large clumps of moss to get the air into it. Remove any little insects, bits and pieces, put those back out into the garden, and just fluff up your moss. It's quite a messy job, so I always have a dustpan and brush to one side as well. Then what you need to do is to take your binding wire and to attach it to your wreath frame by taking it underneath the frame and twisting it on so that it's securely held in place. Then we're going to get a handful of moss, and you want to just shape it a bit sort of like a sausage shape. And then on the top of the wreath ring, or on the side that you've chosen, you want to add your moss on where the binding wire is attached. So with one hand, hold your moss firmly in place, and then take the binding wire over the top of that moss, and a couple of times. Make sure that you are pulling it nice and firm so that it keeps it in place, and then move around to the next position. Take another handful of moss, slightly shape it, and then overlap at this end. So where the end is of the moss, overlap your moss, and then once again take it round a couple of times, pulling it nice and tight. Work your way all around the wreath ring. When you've got a nice even coverage and you've reached the end, you then need to snip off your binding wire. And then find the frame and take the end of the binding wire underneath the frame again. Wrap it round a couple of times and then poke the end of the wire back into the moss so that you've got no sharp edges on your wreath ring. I'll just give a quick sweep. And then that's it. Your mossed wreath ring is complete. You can see the back of the wreath ring just showing through here, so that's the bottom, and then we can see the depth of the wreath ring here and the top. To store these wreath rings, I keep them vertically stored in a container or a tray, just somewhere out in the outside where they're going to just remain damp until needed. I use these for all of my Christmas wreaths, my spring wreaths, and for some funeral wreaths where they're particularly looking for eco-friendly wreaths, and I may do them onto a twig base instead. Just to look after your wreath ring, just keep making sure that they're slightly moist as you go along. You can spray, leave out in the rain, or just add a little sort of watering can of water on top of the wreath rings just to keep that moss nice and moist.